I'm going to share with all of you whatever I have learned and experienced in my life as a teacher. I have been a teacher of education for the higher classes and also a teacher educator for quite some time. So whatever I could experience in my life through my understanding of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's works in the field of education and otherwise, I think I'll just talk a little about it. And since my field has been education, that too teacher education, I draw a lot of inspiration from the writings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother on education. Sri Aurobindo says it would be a tragic irony of fate if India were to throw away her spiritual heritage at the very moment when in the rest of the world there is more and more a turning towards her for spiritual help and a saving light. This must not and will surely not happen. Unquote. We see that for many centuries, Indian saints, monks, spiritual leaders and guides have gone to different parts of the world to spread the message of universal brotherhood, peace and harmony. A word of solace to those who suffered from the aftermath of different wars, conflicts, battles, or natural calamities and the like. This has been in Indian ethos for many centuries. Spirituality is indeed the master key of the Indian mind. The sense of the infinite is native to it, says Sri Aurobindo. Not that India did not realize the value and significance of the material life or the physical life, its externalities and material laws. She always saw the universe as one whole and that all in existence is the product and byproduct of one creator who holds the command to govern all laws of nature. Without understanding the complexity of this universe in the absence of man's numerous hidden powers, not seen overtly or consciously, has been a known fact to India. India saw man has the power of exceeding himself, of becoming more or greater than what he is. She saw God beyond the gods, beyond God, his own ineffable eternity. I quote again. She saw that there were ranges of life beyond our life, ranges of mind beyond our present mind, and above these she saw the splendors of the spirit. Then, with that calm audacity of her intuition, which knew no fear or littleness and shrank from no act, whether of spiritual or intellectual, ethical or vital courage, she declared that there was none of these things which man could not attain if he trained his will and knowledge. He could conquer these ranges of mind, become the spirit, become a god, become one with God, become the ineffable Brahman. Unquote. Hence, it may be implied in the final analysis that India had a distinguished character, a psychic character. Sri Aurobindo meant by this term the soul or the spark. In common language we call spirit or soul. This is the inmost self of an individual, the true self, the seat of the divine. And this particular word has been coined by him. He has talked about the personality, the inner parts and the outer parts. We will deal with it in education in some other time. After a little while. So every nation has its outer appearance, outer form, and its inner also. India, being a country very unique in nature, which carries a psychic character, it has been in her as an ingrained character for many, many centuries. The psychic and spiritual tendency of this great country can never be forgotten. Her great yearning to grapple with the infinite, this is what Sri Aurobindo says, her great yearning to grapple with the infinite and possess it, her incredible religious sense, great yearning to grapple with the infinite and possess it, her ineradicable religious sense, her idealism, her yoga, the constant turn of her art and her philosophy. If we read Sri Aurobindo's writings, especially this book, The Foundations of Indian Culture, we get to know what a glorious past we had, and that is still there. The seed is still there, and we can go again towards that height. The integral view of life is looked as a complete whole. It does not reject the material way of existence, nor does it say the denouncement of earthly life. It tries to bring a synthesis between the matter and spirit. It emphasizes on the very fundamental principle of the growth of consciousness, which means that man has to rise himself from the ordinary present condition of consciousness to the divinehood or divine consciousness. Quote, man is a transitional being, he is not the final. For in man and high beyond him ascend the radiant degrees that climb to a divine supermanhood. There lies our destiny and the liberating key to our aspiring but troubled and limited mundane existence. Unquote. In ordinary terms, one thinks and understands that a human being has a mind, a little more than the animals, which is enclosed in a living body. But mind is not capable of the truth. It is an ignorant seeker of the truth, the highest, the supreme. According to Sri Aurobindo, there is something beyond mind called supramental or the Gnostic power of consciousness. This is in reality the eternal possessor of truth. In the evolutionary process, human being has to rise up to the stage of Superman. This is inevitable. It is the true purpose of the inner spirit and the reasoning of nature's process. Superman, something beyond the mental man, beyond human greatness, knowledge, intelligence or power, etc. Superman is a greater consciousness than the highest consciousness proper to human nature. Since man is a mental being and its mentality works here involved, obscure and degraded in a physical brain, it is still imprisoned in the narrow walls of its own ego, which is resistant to change and a caterer to interest its own small amusements and desires or pleasures of life and body. Hence the present misery, pain, conflicts, disharmony, war, and many more such things, many more such events which we see and which we read also in the history and even now in day-to-day life. Many more are based world happenings that clearly indicate that man is yet not liberated. These come out from the animal nature of the human. Man is yet not free from the darkness or obscurities, but he is capable of ridding himself from such evils. we, the people of India, are in a state of inertia. That's what, I feel. Hence, so much of corruption, poverty, disease, unemployment, and other such things we come across. We are resistant to change. This is human nature. Old rigidities, beliefs, narrowness of mind, and the change must come. The change which will take us to a higher degree of consciousness. But the big question now is how to get rid of this tamas or inertia. And even the bigger question is, what should be the role and system of education in India for its true national development? There is a famous speech of Sri Aurobindo which was delivered by him in 1908 in Bombay. That speech, though it was on national education, it gives us many clues to what education should be now after independence and how we have to create a new future through education. It gives us many, many solutions, many answers. Here, first of all, Sri Aurobindo, the way he has described the word nation, as all of you know that Sri Aurobindo was a great lover of the country, and for him, India was not just, a land of mass or, physically what we read in geography, but he considered as Ma or motherland, or to be very precise, Bharat Ma. The word nation now may be understood first to formulate a system of education for India. What he says, as with the man, so with the nation. To think about our nation is first to think about our physical motherland. Now, the physical motherland, what according to him is the physical motherland? Like we human beings, we have three types of bodies. We have the physical, this gross body. Then we have the subtle body. And then we have the causal body. Likewise, he says, a nation too has these three bodies. Since what is in the individual is the universal, he says a living nation is a living entity. It's a growing entity which is full of consciousness. Its nature is to grow, and it should grow and attain much more loftier heights. It may happen after 1,000 years or in next 20 years, but happen it must. One should underline this very, phrase, happen it must. We find so much of conviction, so much of strength, so much of divine power under the words which he has used in his speech on national education. And to us, he gives a lot of hope, a lot of optimism for a new India. This vast land of India stretching from the great Himalayas to down south, Kanyakumari, and the boundaries formed by the seas of east and west, the rivers Ganga, Yamuna, Godavari, Krishna, etc. They are flowing since ages. The beautiful ancient structures, the architecture, the imposing buildings, very artistic monuments, they all speak of our glory. We can find all this description in Bankim Chandra's song Vande Mataram. The beauty of this country, the what should I say? Not just the beauty. I would say that all these things, they somehow they project the spirit of our country. And this Bankim Chandra song, Vande Mataram, actually, we as children, we used to have All India Radio services. Even now it is existing. So every morning, the All India Radio service would start with the first stanza of Vande Mataram only. So right from our childhood, we understood at least, that this is our country, and it brought in us a feeling of love, a feeling of respect, giving dignity to our country. And here in the ashram in Pondicherry, on all the special days, on all the significant days, all those who go for the meditation in the playground, they all sing together this beautiful song, this beautiful Vande Mataram. The subtle body of our nation is the feelings of joys and sorrows, desires, good or bad. Then the third body. The third body, the causal body, can be understood like this. Those aspects of the country, Sri Aurobindo says, which may undergo changes in course of time, yet always remain in the body in seed state, as permanent as the atom. They are always present there, and being the origin, it is out of them that the future takes shape. This is the causal body. Spirituality is ingrained in Indian soil, but that would not mean that a nation like India can develop only in the inner life or her spirit. Well, the outer form and appearances of our country will certainly change through a change in the consciousness. Everything comes out in the physical from the inner. If we have to rise, we have to develop in all spheres, outer and inner, make life perfect in both. And with the synthesis of matter and spirit, India will glorify, India will rule over, but not in the political sense I am saying. It will command, it may become, it has to become the leader of the world. In many aspects we come across, things are changing now, things are undergoing a lot of upheaval, and in most of the systems, most of the things, the old things are dying, new things are emerging, and we see that in every fall, some kind of rise is taking place. So now what is the new thing? A new attitude, a new approach needs to be developed for our nation. A feeling of love for our motherland, Bharat Ma. Our physical mother gives birth to us, and then we feel so indebted to her for whatever she has given to us as a child. And even, I think the mother's role in India is remarkable. So we have to take into account the role of India as our mother. It is our motherland. So we have to identify our aim of life. As individuals, we must see what for I am here. What is my true purpose of living here? What can I do for my country? What can I do for this motherland of India? How can I serve? How can, it's not necessary to go to army or navy only. Whatever we are, wherever we are, we can offer our capacities, our abilities, our everything what we have to the nation through our works, through our dedication, through our devotion. With what means can I help develop my nation? So, when we talk about, with what means, Education, I find, is the spine of a country. And education can do wonders. It has the miraculous power to change anyone, any human being on the individual level. And of course, the whole country. The whole country can change. And since I say this with conviction, because after turning to Sri Aurobindo, I realized that yes, our country has given so much to the world, but some dark period has come. It will come out, we will come out of it, but for that we have to make a lot of effort. We have to make a lot of sacrifice. And education is the best thing we can make use of. We can do wonders with change in our education. And Sri Aurobindo's views on national education in the years 1894 and 1949. This is what I learned from different sources. That 1949, the article which he wrote, which was published in the Bulletin of Physical Education of Ashram, that gives a clear indication of perfecting the instruments of body, life and mind, along with the inmost self. Because, for self-perfection, the whole personality needs to be perfected. Body is an instrument. So is the case of the vital. He has used the word vital, psychic and spiritual, the mind, body, vital and mind. They form the outer parts of our personality, and psychic and spiritual are the inner ones. We have to understand what, according to Sri Aurobindo, should be the aim of education. If we have to make use of a new system of education, then obviously we have to keep in mind that what should be the aim of education. Since we all aspire that India should rise. We all aspire that India must come, must come. If not, I would say, if I'm not bragging or if I'm not, trying to exaggerate, all of us feel that India must come to more than what other nations have achieved, to that level, to that height. Sri Aurobindo says, I quote, "The chief aim of education should be to help the growing soul to draw out that in itself which is best and make it perfect for the noble use." Unquote. Now, here in this very statement, the way he has dealt with the aim of education, it cannot be seen in other educational theories which we read in our texts. People don't talk, these big educational thinkers, they don't talk about the growing soul. Though many of the educators in the past, they tried their level best to do something with the inner self of a child, but probably they didn't have a clear indication or the clear direction of what they are wanting. Somewhere, they came very close to the soul, but something happened and they withdrew. And nobody came out. I'm looking at the whole world, not just our Indian thinkers. Indian thinkers, of course, naturally, all of them, they get inclined and they have been talking about the development of the soul. But in the West or in totality, if we see the world, we don't come across, in the field of education, people don't know even what the soul is. There are countries where people Really, they don't know what the spirit is, what the soul is, what is this inmost self. So I think this again gives us a direction how a teacher or a parent or people who are involved in the system of education, be it the managers, be it the support staff of an institution, how they have to take into account the children who come and the children who are under their charge. They have to also change their own attitude towards the child. Their attitude should be, again, to look at the child as a growing soul. The child is small, young, that is a different thing, but he or she is also a soul, like the parent, like the teacher, and growing. So that particular shift must take place. We come to see what Sri Aurobindo has said about the 3 principles of true teaching. The first one, which amuses people in the mainstream, when we say, nothing can be taught, kuch bhi sikhaya nahi ja sakta. A teacher is a helper and a guide. He is not a taskmaster. The teacher, creates a beautiful atmosphere, a kind of, learning atmosphere, and with the love, with the harmony of the whole atmosphere, the teacher behaves in a fashion where the teacher is a helper and a guide, or a facilitator, a person who facilitates the learning of the child. The second principle of true teaching is the mind has to be consulted in its own growth. There should not be any imposition, there should not be any hammering or some kind of, strict rules for the child to do and learn something according to the teacher's wish or according to the parent's wish. And the third one is to work from near to far, from that which is to that which shall be. If anything has to be brought in from outside, it must be offered, not forced in the mind of the child. A free and natural growth is the condition of genuine development. I must say that in the past few years, I have seen things changing in the system all over the world. These three principles can be seen, if not directly, in a subtle way, in a different way, I can say, all over, the way they are functioning. And if you can pick up our own document of 2005, the National Curriculum Framework, when you find, when you read that document, especially on aims of education and the focus group which worked on teacher education, you will realize that, these 3 principles of true teaching are, are playing underneath. So things are changing and they have to change. They must change. He had already said that, happen it must. The integral approach to life tells us not to ignore our body. So is the case here in education. We have to make our instrument of body a perfect instrument. So we must have physical education, and in physical education, we must give importance not just only on the strength or stamina or building the muscles. That is important, but helping the body to grow it consciously, to develop it consciously, like, through food, through nutrition, through sleep, through rest and relaxation. All these things are to be taken care of, the physical education. Actually, Sri Aurobindo had written those articles, and the mother, when she came to the ashram, she concretized all these things And she started a school, she set up a school which now is called Sri Aurobindo Center for Integral Education. Sorry, Sri Aurobindo Center of International Education. So the integral education is a five-fold education, and education to be complete must cater to these five parts of the human beings: the physical, the body; the vital, which is the seat of desires, the Pran Shakti; the mental, the mind; and the inner, the psychic and spiritual, which is done through the process of psychicization. And the mother beautifully explains in her writings the practice of psychic education on a daily basis, the sure and simple way to grow our consciousness. Like, for example, the mind is incapable of judging spiritual things. Be only burning fire for progress. Never forget your goal and remain perfectly calm in all the circumstances. Never take any physical happening at its face value. The practice of simple yet powerful things suggested by her opens up large vistas for both human and national development. Once, somebody in the ashram, I don't know if she was a teacher or just a sadhika, she told this ashramite to write every day the reflections of how did she conduct herself during the whole day, and make introspective study of herself. Note down each and every detail of inner and outer movements, and trying to identify the origin of a particular problem in nature and how to be more alert and aware to get rid of that weakness or shortcoming. And she asked her to write regularly, very sincerely, and gave the assurance that for 6 months you write and you find the change. It's a marvelous exercise, I must say, and if one continues doing it, the psychic education and training becomes a big help for further advancement in the path. Likewise, there are many spiritual exercises she has given. One can go through them, one can practice through those exercises. With regard to vital education, in ashram school we find importance is given to music, dance, different art forms, theatre, and children are given the freedom to choose any art form and enhance in whatever the child is interested in. Basically, the vital, which is a seat of desires, which has all the emotions, sensations, and impulses, this needs to be developed through our character formation and development, through the refinement of our emotions, how to channelize our vital energies. So these art forms, they really help a lot. Then also how to develop and utilize our sense organs. And lastly, the development, cultivation, discrimination of aesthetic sense. With regard to mental education, she says, a true education of mind which will prepare man for a higher life has 5 principal phases. Normally, these phases follow one another, but in exceptional individuals, they may alternate or even proceed simultaneously. These are briefly development of the power of concentration, the capacity of attention, development of capacities of expansion, widening, complexity and richness, organization of one's ideas around a central idea, a higher ideal of a supremely luminous idea that will serve as a guide in life. Thought control, rejection of undesirable thoughts to become able to think only what one wants and when one wants. And lastly, the fifth, development of mental silence, perfect calm, and a more and more total receptivity to inspiration coming from the higher regions of the being. She has suggested some mental exercises also to avoid, to avoid these unpleasant thoughts which disturb us, the forgetfulness or the boredom, or how to remove inertia of mind. There are many such things, she has talked about. And education is something to be lived. Education is something to be practiced. Whatever discipline I have, if suppose I am studying science or if I am studying philosophy, how I can live the different things I have learned, the way I want to lead my life, if I am a science student, then how I can lead a life with scientific temper, scientific attitude. So that must also be clear to a teacher. And in any case, integral education, of course, is giving us many opportunities to grow our consciousness. Hence, Yoga Sadhana, all Yoga Sadhana can be done through education only. If I am in the business of education, I get a very big opportunity to work towards this direction. And she says, in a way, a teacher is a yogi. I think I can conclude here with a quote of the mother. On the physical plane, the divine expresses himself through beauty. On the mental plane, through knowledge. On the vital plane, through power, and on the psychic, through love.